Good afternoon. In the last few years, if there's been one economic event which has really, played a very important role in defining our economic policy, especially for retail investors to look at how the market shall shape up, etc., I think that has been budget. It has been in many ways a resurrection of budget as a key economic event. And this year's budget, of course, was one of the most sought after and awaited budgets, I would say. Good afternoon. My name is Shoibal, and I basically head the investment and wealth solutions business for HSBC in India. And I have the privilege this afternoon to speak to someone who understands and who has been into the budget review process for years together now. He doesn't need any other introduction. It's Nilesh Shah, CEO and a very senior veteran of the investment management industry. Nilesh, thank you for giving time to us this afternoon.
My pleasure, Saibal Bhai.
Super. Nilesh bhai, you have been associated with budget for so long. I think I'll start first by asking, there's so much anticipation about this year's budget. So what was driving it, and how is it any different from any other budget?
So I think from a policy point of view, last 10 years budget were more focused on supply side measures to boost growth. They focused on building infrastructure which was lacking in India. They built roads, they doubled power capacity, they put airports, they improved data connectivity, they created metros. Between 2014 and 24, India's physical infrastructure was doubled. This was through more allocation, better execution. It also looked at social infrastructure in form of toilets, water tap, and so on and so forth. This is the first year where government is focused also on giving demand side push, which is tax rebate to consumers. So policy wise, from focusing on infrastructure creation more and creating supply side measures to also focusing on demand side push through tax rebate to middle class. That's the one differentiator in this budget.
So, Nilesh bhai, I think all of us in the middle class have been looking forward to the tax benefit that is accrued. Maybe I'll start from there, Nilesh bhai. How does, apart from relief to that particular income earning segment, how do you see the tax sob basically benefiting the overall economy and consumption especially?
So there is no free lunch, Saibal Bhai. This tax cut is like bursting a firecracker on the Diwali day. You light the fuse, and sometimes fuse does create cracker to go, and sometimes there is a big blast. For this 1 lakh rupee tax rebate to individual taxpayers to create a multiplier effect, money must be spent in India. If a crore or so beneficiaries of this tax rebate, suppose decides to spend traveling abroad, sending kids abroad for education, or buying imported goods, there will be no material benefit to Indian economy. We must spend this money in India to create that multiplier effect. And our current ED at IMF, Mr. Krishnamurthy Subramanian, explained that this could be about 5 times if 80% is spending and 20% is saving. Now, whether it's 1 time, 5 time, it will all depend upon how quickly we spend this money on Indian product or services.
So it should ideally fuel domestic consumption, Nilesh bhai, if I could sort of summarize, right? Also, Nilesh bhai, we've of course have been speaking about consumption as a key theme in Indian economy, and then we obviously move to manufacturing, and then we are again talking about consumption. Would you tell us a bit about the relationship between consumption and the apparent slowdown in the economy in the last few months, which people have been talking about, and how does the budget solve for some of that?
So the last 3 months slowdown is more attributable to investment and government spending than consumption. Between July, August, September, there was widespread rain, hence construction activity slowed down, which impacted cement sales. People were unable to move from one place to another place because of rainwater. It slowed down diesel and petrol consumption. Third, there was Shraddh period in September. People deferred auto purchases to October, November. That slowed down auto sales. And most importantly, the government was under election code for April, May, June, July. And hence the spending of government money was at a much, much slower pace. We had year-on-year drop in Capex by government. And as you know, Capex has multiplier effect. So 5.4% GDP growth in September 24 quarter was attributable more to monsoon, Shraddh period, and government spending than subdued consumption. But outside of that, we have seen Hindustan Lever, Dabur, Marico, Colgate talking about limited demand for their products. We have seen biscuit companies talking about subdued demand. Our two-wheeler sales in 2024 is lower than 2019. We have seen in last 6 months, consumer utensil company or low-end consumer good companies like mixture grinder, fan, talking about low demand, which shows that consumption was slowing down. This needed a boost. Now, partly there was leverage in consumption. साइबिल भाई, हम लोग वो जमाने के जहां पे क्रेडिट कार्ड यूज करना गलत होता था. अब जनरेशन ऐसी आ गई है जो क्रेडिट कार्ड के ऊपर ट्रैवल करके आ जाएगी. So there was leverage spending. The wage growth slowed down as jobs became difficult due to technology disruption. And there was some amount of subduedness as overall growth came down. This needed a boost, which is what this 1 lakh crore tax rebate is providing. But please remember, Saibal Bhai, these benefits are coming to people who are earning from 7 lakh to 15 lakh rupee more than people who are above 15 lakh or 18 lakh or 20 lakh, whatever number you feel appropriate. I am also benefiting from this tax rebate, but my consumption is not going to change. But people who are in that 7 to 15 lakh bracket, they are going to spend. ये लोग रोटी कपड़ा मकान पे तो नहीं बेचने वाले. They are going to spend on travel. Please go to Prayagraj, not to Singapore. They are going to spend on airline and hotel to take their family out on a vacation. Please go to Goa and Kutch and Ranthambore and other places. Don't go abroad. They are going to spend this money on education and entertainment. बस हिंदी मूवी देखना, बॉलीवुड मूवीज देखना, उनको बहुत जरूरत है आपकी. This consumption will go towards education, healthcare, tourism, travel, entertainment, and hence this sector should do well in the days to come. Most importantly, we need multiplier effect, as that multiplier effect results into more capacity utilization in various products. Even if you are watching a movie, there will be money spent on making that movie. There will be money given to artists who are working in the movie, technicians who are making that movie. That creates a multiplier effect. As capacity utilization goes up because there is demand, new jobs will be created, and we can create a virtuous cycle of consumption boosting economic output.
So, Nilesh bhai, thank you for that perspective. I think the fact that consumption drives the rest of the drivers in the economy is evident. And I think you're making that point saying that it basically starts the virtuous cycle there. You, of course, also spoke about how this budget stands out in many ways vis-a-vis the earlier budget, especially in terms of capacity utilization, if I could say that. Apart from driving consumption, especially by the specific policy on taxation, is there anything else, Dinesh bhai, that you think are two or three outstanding features of the budget?
The most important thing which I liked in this budget is investment for future. अभी हमने डीप सीक देखा, and the first question is, why are we not creating it? Saibal bhai, I'll share something. As per Professor Ashok Junjunwala of IIT Madras, I have heard this in kissa from him. There are 7 engineering students in North India. While studying for engineering, raised 60 lakh rupee to make a rocket engine. So, गाड़ी का engine नहीं, rocket का. The first prototype they made while studying engineering, and within 60 lakh rupee budget, created a thrust of 4,500 Newton. The commercial payload requires 25,000 Newton thrust. यही बच्चे कल इंजीनियर बन जाएंगे और 60 लाख की जगह 60 करोड़ या 6 करोड़ खर्चा मिल जाएगा, बजट मिल जाएगा. They'll make an engine which will have 25,000 Newton thrust. We don't have limitation of knowledge. Our challenge is how do we nurture that knowledge? In this budget, there is 10,000 crore fund for venture capital investment. Availability of money does not produce output. It needs to be channelized properly. And I hope SIDBI, along with other private venture capitalists, do a great job. Last year's budget announced 1 lakh crore for deep tech innovation. This budget provided 20,000 crore. I hope this 20,000 crore is given to our Jugaad engineers who can make globally competitive products. We spend more than $1 trillion in import and export of goods. 8 to 9% is shipping and logistics cost. We don't own many ships. We don't make many ships. Our entire export-import is on someone else's ships. And we pay huge cost for that. This budget provides 25,000 crore for making ships, building ships, manufacturing ships. Saibal bhai, we are energy dependent. We are one of the largest importer of oil and gas in the world. Kal ko utke, if oil and gas stops coming to India, we will be paralyzed. In this budget, we are putting 20,000 crore for small modular nuclear reactor. We are already Atmanirbhar in making of this. We just need money so that we can make it. Between SIDBI's 10,000 crore fund for venture capital, 20,000 crore deep tech innovation fund, 25,000 crore maritime shipping, maritime development fund, and 20,000 crore small modular nuclear development. I think this can help create India's future growth if executed well. This is what I like of this budget the most. Obviously, it requires execution outside.
So, Nilesh, on one hand, you're saying from a near to mid-term, there is a consumption push, and from a mid to long term, there is a push to create opportunities for growth, build infrastructure, enable technological advancements. That's an interesting thing. But Nilesh, before I can ask some of the questions which I have rehearsed, I'm getting a number of questions on the message board, so I'll get some of that to you directly. One of which is the obvious question. It is
one
about
thing, Saibal bhai.
Sure.
Before that, I just want to make one comment.
Sure, please.
Outside of budget, we need couple of things to make this multiplier effect. I talked about citizens spending 1 lakh crore in India rather than outside India. We also need support from RBI to create credit so that growth can happen. As a banker, Saibal bhai, you know how tight liquidity is. We need to create durable liquidity so that credit growth can go to higher double-digit numbers than current numbers. And we also need interest rate cuts because our real interest rates are higher. So we need credit transmission, we need lower rates from RBI. We also need something from Government of India. In 91, India abolished license permit Raj. That changed India's growth orbit from below 4% to above 4%. Now we need to abolish Inspector Raj. That will change India's growth orbit from below 7% to above 7%. What do I mean by Inspector Raj? Saibal bhai, there are so many rules, regulations on our entrepreneur. One rule says that you need to provide spittoons in factory. अरे आज के बच्चे ने थूकदानी देखी नहीं है. One rule says you must maintain 3-year health record for your canteen cook, otherwise you'll go to bar for 3 years, behind bar for 3 years. Now, whether ECG is good enough health record, or I need 2D echo, or I need stress test, there's no definition. Do I keep all or do I keep one? My decision is not important. It is the inspector's decision which is important. The canteen's wall should be whitewashed. But मेरा सफेद सफेद है या काला है वो तो आप डिसाइड करेंगे. So we need to improve ease of doing business by removing Inspector Raj so that our entrepreneurs can compete in the outside world. Tatas, Birlas, Ambanis, Adanis know how to compete, but there are many more Tatas, Birlas, Ambanis, Adanis whom we need. And that is where between RBI, government and citizens, if we can have support, this budget will be a game changer. But without their support, this budget cannot be a game changer for sure.
Nilesh bhai, since you spoke about RBI, what's your sense? I mean, are we expected to see a rate cut soon too? I think on liquidity, we of course have seen some action coming in from RBI, but your guess, how do you see, let's say, coming couple of months shaping up from an RBI policy point of view?
So RBI has already increased liquidity by OMO, 56 days VRR and buy-sell swap. But please remember, currency in circulation goes up in March and in February and March. And there is FX intervention going on. So RBI needs to be more aggressive on creating durable liquidity so that credit growth can resume from current 10% plus or minus to somewhere around 13-14%. Obviously, this credit growth should happen without NPA burden. So it's not throwing money, it's intelligent credit creation. And we need to cut rate. Our window of cutting rate is small and shallow. Fed is unlikely to cut rates in the near term, but we have to take the chance of cutting rates by 25-50 basis point because that's the window which is available so that it can complement the fiscal prudence shown by the budget. This budget has fiscal prudence and hence it gives room or scope for RBI to cut rates.
I think so. I was mentioning that I'm already getting a few questions on. First one is slightly generic. Apart from the income tax rebate that you talked about earlier, what do you think are some of the other features of the budget which impacts the common man?
See, the common man is impacted by every step of government, whether in short term or long term, or directly or indirectly. Now, when government enhances allocation for road, railway, defense, common man benefits. It could be in the form of lower inflation because your goods are moving faster on road and railway, or it could be in the form of lower terrorist attacks because there is better defense at the gates. Uh, when government becomes fiscally prudent, it means you are living lesser burden on next generation. पहले हम चद्दर से बहुत लंबे पैर फैलाते थे, अब चद्दर से थोड़े लंबे पैर फैला रहे हैं. So every step of government has a direct or indirect short, medium or long-term impact on common man's life. Many a times it is understandable, many a times it is not understandable.
Nilesh bhai, of course, when we talk about common man, over the last few years, you've seen a lot of retail investors coming into the markets, both in equity markets as well as through mutual funds. And one of the questions that I see here really is that what do you have to say about the recovery? Do you see the markets getting slightly more stable in the short, medium term, and a broad sense of which way, which direction do you think the markets will take for the year?
So budget is good for economy, and hence many people expect it should be good for the market too. Unfortunately, Saibal bhai, we are in a market where Benjamin Graham's quote is applicable. In the short term, market is like a voting machine. In the long term, market is like a weighing machine. Currently, market is driven by FPI flows rather than fundamentals. In the short term, when flows are higher, bigger, then prices go above fair value. We saw it during Harshad Mehta time. We saw it during TMT bubble time. We saw it even during 2008 infrastructure boom. When the flows are large in terms of redemption, outflows, then prices go below fair value. We again saw that in 2008 subprime crisis. We saw that during 2020 COVID crisis. Currently, FPIs are selling. Their selling is likely to continue. In our opinion, some amount of FPI selling is attributable to our second quarter slowdown where growth came below expectation at 5.4 and earnings slowdown of September and December 24 quarter where earnings growth came below expectation. But a larger part of FPI redemption, FPI outflow is because of their vote on emerging market as an asset class. Over last 10, 15 years, emerging market as an asset class have done well, has done very badly, and developed market has done very well. Now there is a fundamental question. Why should I remain invested in emerging market? Emerging markets have fallen despite India doing as well as America because Russia, China, Brazil, South Africa all have performed miserably. तो अब लोग ये सोच रहे हैं कि emerging market से ही नाम निकाल दो. When they redeem 100 from emerging market fund, 20 goes from India. The second thing which is happening is that मेरे को US में 4.5% मिल रहे हैं. Why should I worry about emerging market where I'm going to make 7, 8, 9% return? So some money is going from equity to US fixed income as an asset class. There is a proverb which says that in famine, there is always additional month. If this outflows were not sufficient, we have President Trump. He's saying, make America great again. America first. Every investor wants to show to President Trump that they are investing in America. Masayoshi Shon of SoftBank went to America. He said, President, you asked me to bring $100 billion. I have brought $500 billion. कुछ पैसा तो इंडिया से जा रहा है. So there is घर वापसी of American capital to American market. Between घर वापसी, emerging market underperformance, and 10-year US yield at 4.5%, we believe FPI outflows are likely to continue, and that will keep our market on tenterhooks in the short term.
Since you spoke about US dollar, I think the other question, of course, obviously related to this discussion is where do you see the dollar rupee going? Of course, we have seen a sharp fall, some of it, of course, attributable to the FPI outflows, etc. But where do you see this going? Do you see it continuing for a while longer? Do you see it stemming down over the coming couple of months? What's your broad sense of the dollar rupee piece?
So Saibal, by rupee's destiny is to depreciate. Our inflation is higher than our trade partners. Our productivity level is lower than our trade partners. In India, Narayan Murthy talks about working for 70 hours. People start cursing him and meme factory starts. In China, people work far more than that. So rupee's destination is to depreciate. In the past, we used to depreciate 7-8% a year. Now we depreciate 2-3% a year. But rupee will depreciate. At this point of time, FPI outflows are happening. Look at the trade from American global investor point of view. Rupee was 84, looking overvalued. Nifty was 26,000, looking little expensive. US equity market was little higher, but President Trump was going to announce tax cuts. And there was also need to show make America great again by bringing back money. Put together, it was no-brainer trade that they sold India to go to America. They benefited with 15% correction in Nifty. They benefited with 4% depreciation in rupee. They benefited from 10% rise in equity market. Net, you made somewhere around 30% trade. It was worth doing. So we need to let rupee be near fairly valued rather than overvalued. This correction is making that happen. But eventually, will rupee continue to go down over a long period of time? Answer is yes, unless until our inflation narrows down to trade partners and our productivity is better than our trade partners.
Again, a related question, Nilesh bhai, especially on Trump's policy on tariff, etc. And do you see the budget in any way tries to bring some degree of direction to which way India trade will look in the Trump era 2.0? And budget aside, Nilesh bhai, broadly, what do you see as Trump era 2.0 playing out for India?
So one, President Trump is fairly unpredictable. What he will do, probably he also doesn't know. We need to engage with President Trump on multiple fronts. One, our trade deficit with America is not just goods deficit of $36 billion of FY24 and IT exports. It also needs to take into account 200,000 Indian students studying in America and spending $10 billion. It also needs to take in account 17 lakh Indians which travel to America to visit their friends and family or for tourism and spends more than $10 billion. It needs to take into account all the payments made by Indians to companies like Facebook, Meta, Twitter, Google. Many of these companies don't book earnings of India in American companies. They book it in Dublin and Nassau and Mauritius and Luxembourg companies. So we need to give a clear picture to President Trump that, look, we are not number 11 on your hit list. We are somewhere number 20. तो पहले 19 को मारो फिर हमारे पास आना. Number 2, we need to engage with America to explain them that when you deal with India, you create win-win situation. Imagine if you had programmed all your software in China and not in India. Today, for every tariff increased on China, China would have shut down an American power plant, closed down an airport, shut down a bank, and God knows what havoc they would have created. We don't put bugs, we don't put virus, we don't put traps in the program which we have written and given to America. By working with India, they get cost, they got efficiency, they get productivity, and they get security. So let's replicate IT model in toys and software and garments and footwear and so on and so forth. Third, Mr. Trump is deal maker. We'll have to make some deal. We'll import your defense equipments and hopefully we'll be able to withstand tariff retaliation in a more a comfortable manner. As long as our neighbors, China gets hurt with President Trump's tariff
We're good.
and we get hurt less, we should be fine.
Sure, sure, Nilesh bhai. I think that's a very pertinent point that you make. But also in the context of the Trump conversation, are there any two or three broad themes that you believe plays out for us at this point in time? Of course, one, like you mentioned, we may not be numbered among the top 20 people that you would want to really go behind. Two, that our contribution to the American economy remains very, very strong. I think it's intellectual as well rather than only economical. But are there any broad themes that play out for India given the current Trump era?
So, in my opinion, if we can engage with President Trump and make a deal, we will be net beneficiary. It could be on IT side, where more outsourcing can happen to India. It could be on medicine side, where our share in generic medicine can increase even further. And it could be on many other products where US is looking strategic interest through diversification on French shoring.
I
Today,
think you,
we have
you sorry,
emerged
go ahead, go
as
ahead,
a
go ahead.
large player on solar cell, and many Indian companies are setting up factories in America. We could also become a big supplier on garment side, toys and footwear side, chemicals. When we have ability to make all those things, albeit not as cost competitive as China, but with some support from US, we should be in a position to do the same.
Interestingly, I think those are things that we need to be on the lookout when we look at investing in India as well. And then we'll, of course, ask that question to you slightly later. I think coming back to the budget, Make in India, I think that had been a theme for the government for a while. Does the budget really provide for a push on that theme? What are you sensing here? Does this theme remain a critical part of the government's policy?
Uh, Saibal Bhai, I missed your first part because of some connectivity issue. If you can repeat the whole.
Yeah. So, Nilesh bhai, I was saying that Make in India has, of course, been a very critical part of the government's policy for, in fact, a decade now. And I think the entire drive towards making India industry competitive, etc. And many sort of policy decisions were made. Now, this budget specifically, Nilesh bhai, does it really provide for further impetus to Make in India? And do you see this to remain a key part of the government policy from here on?
So, Make in India has been a policy from an Atmanirbharta point of view, as well as from a growth point of view. On the defense side, Make in India has been fairly successful. We have increased our defense exports, which shows that we are making it in India. Whether it's BrahMos missiles or whether it's explosives, India has emerged a defense exporter at 21,000 crore exports. The same success needs to be replicated in many other things. But some of the ingredients for becoming a successful exporter is missing in India. I talked about ease of doing business. At one point of time, Nokia operated world's single largest location mobile phone plant in Sri Perambadur in Tamil Nadu. It got shut down for a variety of reasons. That's ease of doing business. If that plant was successfully running, we might would have got 10 such other plants. Number two, our manufacturing is uncompetitive because there is too large subsidies. Railway passenger fares haven't been revised since last 2 decades. And the last railway minister who proposed to revise railway fares, passenger fares upwards, he was fired by his own party. forget opposition, उसकी पार्टी ने उसको भगा दिया. That entire passenger fare subsidy is levied on industrial freight, which makes our logistics cost high. The second thing is power cost. We don't charge our अन्नदाता commercial power rate. And लंगरबाजी करना वो हमारा नेशनल पास टाइम है. दुनिया भर में T&D losses are known as transmission and distribution losses. In India, we have also given a meaning theft and dacoity losses through langarbaji. That entire subsidy burden is levied on industrial power. In fact, Saibal bhai, both of us pay higher per unit electricity cost than an average Japanese, even though their per capita GDP is 17 times higher than us. With higher industrial power cost and higher railway freight, our manufacturing is becoming uncompetitive. Then comes liquidity and interest burden. That's also hurting us at various points of time. Put together, we don't have building blocks to become globally competitive on exports. Of course, there are some commodities like basmati rice where we have leadership because we are blessed. There are some commodities, thanks to Suzuki, like automobiles, where we have done well. Thanks to entrepreneurs like Bajaj, we have done well even on manufacturing of two-wheelers. But those are exceptions, not rules. So Make in India really needs to be pursued on ground at multiple fronts. Consumer spending in India, RBI maintaining growth orientation, and Government of India improving ease of doing business and reducing subsidies. That will make India a manufacturing powerhouse to compete in exports market. In this budget, there are two things which they have talked about, but it needs to be executed on ground. One is footwear industry and second is toy industry. From being net importer of toys through various measures, we have become exporter. But we need to grow it on a much bigger scale. We have 144 crore people. We have technology of making shoes and footwear. But the ecosystem through cluster manufacturing, through ecosystem for raw materials and components, we are missing. The government has talked about developing those things. If that happens, then we can become force in toys and footwear globally.
Dinesh since you spoke about subsidies in some manner, in the sense that two core elements of our production capabilities in many ways subsidized, I think I'm getting a very interesting question, a long one, but I think it covers some very interesting topics. It says, do you think exemptions for sectors such as agriculture, trust, charities, political parties, religious institutions, etc., defeat the claimed goal of simplification of tax code and widening the base? I think, Dilesh bhai, that's something that I think all middle class have been saying, that we must widen the base. Followed by a question saying, also, should universal income tracking and linking state support, such as around food, fuel, cash transfer, healthcare, to current income and distress, also using this as a path to enrollment, if any, might be a solution? So, long question, but fundamentally what I'd guess is that if some of this subsidy continue through some of these specific elements, and then if the tax bracket is not widen enough, is that not something that one should focus on to really bring slightly more sustainability in the growth path?
So undoubtedly, Saibal bhai, no one is against giving support to the poor and needy. But when that is misused, there should be severe punishment. Today, if you want to give exemptions to trust, be my guest. But if people pay donation to such trust and receive back in cash, then there is a problem. We need to stop that. Similarly, agriculture, if you provide them exemption because their business is far more volatile, fair enough. But 7% of agriculture households are richer. They earn more than 10 lakh rupee. A salaried person earning 10 lakh rupee and a farmer earning 10 lakh rupee both needs to be taxed at the same level. Now 10 lakh has become 12 lakh. So there has to be parity.
Mm.
Tax compliance also requires rule of law. There are many places, Saibal bhai, where tax inspector would not like to go. Peet jayega bechara. Now, we need to create rule of law so that people start fearing and start complying. It's a very complex subject where everyone knows what is right, but because of vested interest, they are not able to execute the same. Fair enough. Sunshine is the best disinfectant. Leverage technology to ensure that such malpractices are caught. And whenever they are caught, hit them so hard that it becomes a deterrent for everyone. Now, this also requires fairly robust judicial process. We know there are many people who haven't paid their fair share of tax. Their cars are bigger than mine, their houses are bigger than mine. And सबने पूरे लाइफ टाइम में उतना टैक्स नहीं दिया है जितना मैं एक साल में देता हूं. If I can see those things, I'm sure technology will be able to capture it. So absolutely, we need equitable distribution of tax burden on all citizens, whosoever can afford to pay. And rest of the citizens who need support, who need subsidies, be fair in providing to them. No one is arguing against subsidy. People are arguing against misuse of subsidy.
Nilesh bhai, in fact, if I could paraphrase it, focus fundamentally would also need to be an execution of some of the laws that we already have. And I think policies, like you said, in many ways are perhaps well intended, but are misused, and hence execution then becomes critical, saying, how are you going to ensure that the policy really gives the outcome that you're looking for? Super. Sorry, go ahead, go ahead. No, you're saying something.
No, exactly, Saibal bhai. The proof of cake in is eating it, not describing it.
Correct.
We need
Correct.
execution, execution, execution. Intent is very good. Now go and execute.
Absolutely. Neeraj bhai, so of course, one of the things that we have been speaking about is renewable energy, and of course President Trump's view on renewable energy, we all know. But you did speak about the fact that in spite of what I think is coming in from the US, the fact of the matter is renewable energy would is a reality, and I think India continues to have some degree of interest in that piece in terms of exports to US, right?
So renewable energy is a very complex subject. One, because of technological development. Today, through nuclear fusion in California as well as in China, as per China's claim, they have created artificial sun, which gives more energy than what it consumes. The researchers believe by 2030, over next 5 years, energy will become free and as easily available as sunlight. God knows whether that will happen or not, but ye claim hai. Nuclear fission, which was always in large reactors and had higher chances of safety risk, is now moving towards small modular reactors. They are more efficient and are much less prone to risk. Green hydrogen through electrolysis is moving further up, also because of advancement in storage technology, be it battery, be it ammonia, and so on and so forth. Even in solar energy, rules are changing, whereby despite cloudy weather, despite limited sunlight, solar energy can be produced. Wind turbines are becoming more and more efficient. So there is a whole host of energy ecosystem which is developing. And maybe there are 5 or 10 things which I don't even know today. It will probably come very soon. So as India, my recommendation will be, let's put our rumal, our handkerchief in every bus. पता नहीं कौन सी डेस्टिनेशन पे लेके जाएगी, बट सब बस में अपना रिजर्वेशन होना जरूरी है. As an investor also, please follow the same thing. We don't have enough knowledge to figure out what will work and what will not. Let's ride on all the buses, hoping that something will reach its destination. The second challenge which comes on green energy is supply chain. Today, we have become exporter to US of solar modules because we are importing from China, and US does not want to import from China. But our value add is limited. We should leverage that catalyst to become self-sufficient, Atmanirbhar in solar module production. We also need to engage with US so that 80% work is done in India, 20% value add happens in US, and it gets sold as made in US product without any tariff. So it's a fairly complex subject. We'll have to play it like a game of chess, but as smartly as D. Gukesh.
As usual, Nilesh bhai, your references are fantastic. So, Capex, Nilesh bhai, of course, there has been a lot of concern around Capex, saying the government, of course, has not done enough spending on Capex. I think significantly below its targeted number. How do you see that again panning out for the year? And does the budget provide for any direction as to which way Capex is expected to move from here on?
So the best part of the budget is that it has not diluted its focus on Capex. It has just recognized institutional limitation of government to spend money. This year, the target of Capex was ambitious, 11,11,111 crore. Not only it was ambitious, it was also auspicious. And despite that, we couldn't achieve it. Election did play its role, but there were 8 or 9 months available outside of election. But there is institutional limitation on how much government can spend thanks to various checks and balances. Having recognized that limitation, government is saying next year I will spend 11,20,000 crore, marginally ahead of last year's budgeted number, but 10% ahead of revised estimate. The government has also dangled 1,50,000 crore to state governments by way of zero interest 50-year loan if they spend this money on investment on Capex. Hope state governments, which are today short of fund because they are spending more on freebies, will take advantage of that. The government also gives some grants for infrastructure. Collectively, that number is increasing from 13 lakhs to 15 lakhs, which is about 17% increase. So the Capex focus is not diluted. We just have to hope and pray we execute it well on the ground, unlike current year.
I think one of the follow-up questions I'm getting from one of our viewers is fuel Capex spending higher. So he says, how can government push more execution to fuel Capex spending higher? How can Viksit Bharat come along with a plateau of 10%? I'm not too sure if the question is clear, but I guess the question really is that the dream of Viksit Bharat, the vision that we're talking about, how is the government really sort of driving it out? Of course, you spoke about the fact that the focus remains given the budgetary allocation. But from an execution point of view, Nilesh bhai, how do you see us getting there this year?
Saibal bhai, our model is ISRO model. We don't have monies like US to spend on space research. But today, we are sending as many satellites as US is sending. With limited means in space, India is creating miracle. We have put moon rover on the darker side of moon. We have done space docking. We will probably put an Indian astronaut in the sky. Already there is an Indian astronaut, Sunita Williams, in sky for some time, but she is American now. So ISRO is the model. Money, passion, commitment, and most importantly, support, ease of doing business can help create Viksit Bharat even with 10% Capex. The Chinese have taught us how to build things efficiently. In 7 days, they could build Wuhan hospital. In 6 months, they could build shipbuilding plant. In 12 months, they could build Tesla's motor car plant. We need to copy Chinese model of execution.
Nilesh bhai, before I go to markets, and of course, this conversation cannot sort of take the logical movement towards market and your views on it. I'll have one more question, slightly on another microeconomic topic. This again comes from one of our viewers. It says, "What are your views on employment and job creation, income inequality, and very interestingly, share of exports?" We are of course struggling on exports when China is racing ahead at about 30% growth on exports. So export, of course, Nilesh bhai, is a critical element of our conversation. So job creation, income inequality, and exports. I mean, how do these three things sort of play out?
So on income equality, my solution is simple. Let's increase the pie of cake in such a manner that despite being unequal, the smallest portion which a person is getting is far bigger than that small pie for equal distribution. सबको गरीब करके इक्वालिटी लाए, उससे अच्छा बेहतर है कि we expand the pie so that everyone gets lifted, even though inequality is seen very, very large. Number two, on exports of services, we are powerhouse. We have about 7% share, and we should aim to take it to 10%. On goods, we don't have ability to compete. Our share is piddly at about 2.5%, or maybe it is under 2%. I'm not up to date on that number, but it's piddly. We must focus on certain segments where we could leverage our manufacturing like we did it in two-wheeler, like we have done it in auto components. Same way, can we capture garments, toys, footwear, and those kind of easy to pluck fruits. We can also look to expand on agriculture export side. A country like Netherlands, which is half countries below the water, their agriculture exports driven by horticulture is higher than a country like India's total agriculture exports. We have been blessed by God with the world's largest arable land. Netherlands has been cursed by God, whereby half their land is below the water. And yet, what a remarkable achievement Netherlands has done. So we can also look at agriculture exports and leverage the blessings God has given to us. So it's a long topic. We have our limitations, but we can leverage those limitations and still deliver a better job.
Nilesh, but the last few minutes remaining on this conversation, and I would have obviously asked you the question first. Obviously, over the last 5 years, post-COVID, there has been this rise of fresh new investors who had come in, and I think this fall would possibly be something that they've seen for the first time, right? They would not have seen something that has happened for more than 2-3 months now. What would your advice be for these first-time investors who are seeing this fall? How should they play this market out?
One, keep faith on long-term India growth story. There is no need to worry about it. If at all, this budget is making the case stronger. Number two, buy quality. In the excess of bull run, donkeys start outperforming horses. But eventually, horses win the race. Bet on horses, not on donkeys. Three, maintain asset allocation. Never look at past performance to invest. Look at the future potential to invest. While there is case for Indian equity, there is also case for debt and gold in your portfolio. Finally, at this point of time, our view is it's time to be equal weight to equity as an asset allocation. Markets are fairly valued. They are not cheap. Keep some cash to buy during correction if FPI selling continues as it looks like. Invest in gold. The central banks around the world are buying gold, and that will support gold prices in days to come. And also add duration to your fixed income portfolio as interest rates will come down and liquidity will improve in India. That will be our rough advice to the first as well as old investors.
Nilesh bhai, since you spoke about fixed income, a quick sense of how the fixed rates will look from here on. Do you see customers should have a reasonable allocation to fixed income? Nilesh bhai, you know that over the last few years, especially on funds, there is a significant skew towards equity, and fixed income, of course, has not got allocation. But as an investor, do you think we must sort of allocate some amount to fixed income, right?
So definitely you should allocate to fixed income as the expected return from equity has come down. An important point which I forgot to mention, last 5 years return of small cap is 25% plus. That's unlikely to repeat in the future next 5 years. In the market, one should never say never, but while making forecast, one needs to be honest. So you have to moderate return expectations in equity as you are investing at fair value. That being the case, it makes sense to have allocation to equity on duration side. There's also another category called performing credit. It's a small niche AIF dominated category, but there also risk return trade-off is more like fixed income and hence appropriate to invest.
So Nilesh bhai, as an investor, you are saying I need to have a bit of a multi-asset strategy, have reasonable degree of allocation across all these assets, and like you mentioned, when the multiple buses are leaving, I need to have a handkerchief in all the buses to ensure that I cover the distance, and one may go longer than the other one.
Absolutely, Saibal bhai. You have summed it up very well.
Superb. I think we are. I'm continuing to get questions on my chat box here. I think one last question that I would ask, given that we are on time already. Nilesh bhai, I know that you have been a perpetual optimist, of course, a very strong believer in the India story. If I were to ask you two or three broad things that you think continues to drive the India story for the coming 10 years, let's say, what would those three things be?
See, Saibal bhai, at the end of the day, it is the people who make the country. The talent of India is incredible. And despite all the negatives and limitations, we have survived and prospered. In the past, many of our talent used to go abroad for opportunity. Today, also, some of our talent is going abroad for opportunity, but many are staying back, and that talent gives us the confidence. Yesterday, when you saw Abhishek Sharma thrashing English bowlers, you realize that Indian cricket is in safe hands. Number two, it is the availability of capital. I mean, I am a Gujjubai and I'm working instead of being a businessman. Partly it's my risk averseness, but partly it is also my parents didn't have money to back me और अपने में उतना जिगर नहीं था कि रिस्क ले सके. But today, if you have business idea, there is venture capital available to back you through private equity funds, venture capital funds, angel networks. It's not just parents only who need to provide you money. अपने में दम है तो आइडियाज लेके आ और पैसा उठा ले. The third thing is infrastructure. If I have talent, I have capital, I still need infrastructure to run my business. Many years ago, a company failed to transport orange pulp from Nagpur to Mumbai within stipulated time period, which would have helped them create juice, orange juice, and market it. Today, on Samruddhi Highway, I know it's not fully complete yet and there are some patches to work upon, but Nagpur to Nhava Sheva Port Trust, pulp will reach in time so that it can be converted into juice and market offshore. This Triveni Sangam of talent, capital, and infrastructure gives us confidence that apni story chalti rahegi.
Nilesh bhai, what can I say? As usual, an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and very, very refreshing to hear from you your perspective on not just policy, but also I think the fundamental elements of India's economy and society. So really appreciate you taking time and talking to us. I must tell you, I think this is the maximum number of questions which I have got here. All the questions which I've asked to Neeraj bhai, all these questions have come from our viewers. I, in fact, have got a list here. I have not been able to ask a single question from this list. Neither could we look at the presentation, Neeraj bhai, that you put together, but very, very insightful. Really appreciate the time. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
being here. Super. And to our viewers, it's a fantastic for all of you to be on this call. Really appreciate. We'll keep bringing in interesting content on for all our customers and all our viewers here. Please continue to look at HSBC. We have a very interesting property called Navigate with HSBC, which covers a range of investment topics, event-led ideas and concepts, which can help you invest more in a more informed manner and in the right manner. Do keep reaching out. Do watch us more. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Nilesh Bhai, again. Good evening.
Thank you, Saibal Bhai. All the best.
Thank you.